you'd imagine some of their improvements in the scrum in the intervening years is down to Joe McCarthy as well. Mary, like he's pretty good at scrummaging even as a lock. And I was chatting to a friend of mine, Joe O'Neill, last night, who was saying his friend is a school teacher somewhere in Dublin, I think, primary school teacher, and like half the students in this school have a mullet now, and they're calling it the Joe McCarthy. And like as much as we've kind of given credence to McCarthy being like a star in this Irish team for years to come, are we talking about like a guy who could potentially transcend the sport here a little bit? Like, is he good enough to be like a proper worldwide rugby star?
I suppose his force of personality as that emerges might be important in that. And apparently he is a bit of a messer behind the scenes, and his teammates like him in that regard. We haven't seen a huge amount of that publicly as he's kind of finding his feet, but he's good when he does interviews. He's a chatty guy. Clearly got more to him than just rugby. But certainly, yeah, like that is something that Irish rugby should embrace. You have a new star in his early 20s who's already making an impact in big games. I'm sure there'll be harder days. I'm sure there'll be ones where he gets it wrong and he gives away 2 or 3 penalties in a big match, and that maybe is an important factor in deciding the outcome. Like that's part and parcel of it, and that's something that hasn't really happened for say him, for Jack Crowley taking over at out half yet. Maybe it won't. Maybe they're just brilliant players who are going to have success after success, but it will be surprised if that was the case. And Crowley's another one in that regard. Like, of course, England are going to be thinking, this guy's had an armchair ride so far. Let's really get at him. Let's really test his kicking because he's been blocked down a couple of times. Let's put that in his mind with an early block or whatever it might be. Let's rattle him in contact. And he stood up really well to that so far. Any of those tackles just after he passes. But when you put yourself in England's shoes, you're looking for those little potential ins or those reasons that you can give your players some optimism that they can go after and hit Ireland in a way they haven't been hit so far in this championship. But yeah, to bring it back to McCarty, I think you're right. It's cool. It's refreshing. He's got a kind of slightly different mullet. It's more kind of feathery, isn't it? It's a unique style of mullet, and I do like it as well.
Well, you are famously an aficionado. I remember my sister stumbled upon your TikTok account once upon a time, and she thought it was somebody impersonating you because there was so much mullet content. She was
I
like, "Is
just
this
wish I
on
could have
purpose?"
one. I wish I could still do one, but not to be.
Oh, and you mentioned the little bit of imbalance to England's attack. Let's flip that a little bit and talk about what might worry you to any degree about England's attack. I think maybe we're guilty of viewing it as this stodgy, ineffective thing, when in reality, like they're going to have moments in this game. They had moments against Scotland, for example. Is there anything that they can throw at Ireland from what you've seen that will give this Irish defence trouble?
Yeah, obviously their first phase try against Scotland, one of the early launches, that left-hand scrum was really well executed, wasn't it? We saw obviously the influence of Nick Evans, the timing of those little blocker plays. Sneyd, when he's afforded time and space, has a ability to unpick defenses. Be interesting what they do with Marcus Smith. It's kind of a little bit of a dichotomy, isn't it? That Borthwick's first game for England dropped Farrell, played Smith at 10, and you're thinking, okay, Borthwick's going to loosen the shackles here. They're going to play a little bit more expansive rugby, but it just hasn't quite materialized. And if the Smith is going to come back into the team, what kind of role is he going to play? Is he going to be given a little bit more freedom to express himself? It's probably the challenge for England at the moment. As I said, it's difficult to understand the identity based on the profile of players they're selecting, and they seem to be caught in a little bit of halfway house. So yes, I think Felix Jones is obviously incredibly smart. I think it'll be really interesting how they mitigate against Lowe's left foot and how they potentially put Ireland in positions where his left foot isn't as prominent, boot isn't as prominent in terms of their exiting and things like that. Kick to contest, I think probably Calvin Nash hasn't been overly challenged in that area in his first kind of couple of Six Nations starts. So it'll be interesting to see if they put the magnifying glass on him a little bit as well. And yeah, still to be seen whether Keegan comes back in the team. If not, then I would expect the same for Frawley. So I think there could be a bit of an aerial bombardment there as well, and try to assert pressure there and gain field position. But again, when you look at some of the data, like there's 6 second rucks, which 6 seconds or above rucks in the competition is at 20%. So 20% of their ruck speed is at what we would say a real slow pace. Compare that to Ireland, they only have 10% of their ruck speed is at 6 seconds or above. So they're just playing at very different levels currently. And as I said, on current evidence, it's difficult to see them overly challenging Ireland with their attacking structure.
Could they get any change out of a bit of an aerial contest, Murph? Say, even in a situation in which it's Frawley at 15. Nash, as Owen says, probably hasn't been tested going backwards under the high ball, but I still reckon when France played Yoram Moefana, on the left wing over BLB array, that was because they were actually afraid of Nash under a high ball coming the other way, you know. Is that a potential entry point for England?
You mean for England exposing Ireland in a way, or
Yeah.
I guess it might be, yeah, and I'm sure that they've built in those little bits where you pressure test that anyway, regardless of the opposition. And I think Ireland probably can do even a bit more of that on their use of possession. They do often go to contestable box kick when they're in that kind of 22-meter line to halfway line in their own half, and I haven't had massive change out of it so far in this championship. It'll be interesting to see if England bring Freddie Stewart back in or not. Furbank obviously played the last game. Freddie Stewart, we know, is really an outstanding aerial presence, both in defending kicks, but also going after ball when England go contestable themselves. And it feels like he'd be a great weapon to have against Ireland in that regard. And on the attacking side, it's going to be so interesting to see how England actually do look to spoil. Obviously, we know that their system now is ultra aggressive, that they're gonna keep coming hard and they're not going to stop, even if Ireland pick them off once or twice and get line breaks with tip in passes or tip on passes, or guys turning the corner really well and going in between forward defenders. But on the flip side of it, I think England have to go at source, and the line out is going to be another crucial battleground, as it always is. But we know that England are going to go into the air. In the first two games of the Six Nations, Ireland had a perfect record, 100%, but they didn't come under massive pressure in the air. France obviously had the Willems red card to adapt to, and Italy just never got off the ground at all, really. When Wales did compete, that's when we saw those wobbles from Ireland. I think there were 5 line-outs where it wasn't cleanly won, or indeed it was actually lost. So you have to presume that England, with Borthwick being so expert in that area, have just I know it's a lot of talk around their training time, and what they've been spending it on, but you'd imagine that they put a big, massive focus on that, because if they can stop it at source, you're just kind of taking away that super pair from Ireland. You're going to take away so many of those phase attacks that they break people down on. I think Ireland's launch, their set piece strikes have been really brilliant. I mean, it might not be a first phase line break and try, but they're teeing themselves up for damage that they do on subsequent phases. So I think England have to be ultra aggressive there. When they get into phase, then the big focus. Ireland did a brilliant job against Tommy Reffel in the last game. He just wasn't. I know he had a breakdown turnover in the first half, but that aside, he wasn't really a presence. And they'll be looking to do something similar to Ben Earl, who is kind of the chief opposition defensive ruck destroyer for the English. So they're the bits for Ireland to again be cognizant of. England getting in the air and Ben Earl trying to lead that breakdown charge.
And you'd imagine, first and foremost, in England,